Greetings, fellow Godolkin graduates. Bluedragonfive here,
And Rohith Dhar.
and we're back. We're talking Gen V
Mm-hmm.
Season 2, doing a spoiler cast on it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a little late, but a lot has been going on, and the way these shows have been airing, and just general stuff. We're a little delayed, so sorry about that. But Rohit really wanted to talk about Gen V, and well, here we are. So, what'd you think?
Uh, I think overall, I think the season was just okay. Um, and I don't know. I'm in a weird place with the boys' quote unquote franchise, which is I feel like such a unfortunate thing to say to a certain level because when the boys started out, it was very much a really clever and crass send up of the super genre and the corporate elements of it. And now with the fact that hey, it's going to end at season 5, which is what Eric Kripke wished he was able to do with Supernatural. But
Mm-hmm.
then in lieu of that, instead of just the boys ending season 5, we have a spinoff show that's like at least 2 seasons in the can. And then we have potential spinoff. We have like a prequel with Soldier Boy and Stormfront. We have a
But I think
potential.
they're just calling that VOD, and that's both of them in that show, though, isn't it?
But I don't know. It's a boys prequel. That's
Yeah.
yes. But and then we have another spinoff that's likely to be in Mexico or Mexico, specifically Mexico City, or whatever. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that the show was so successful at the early onset, it just feels like the boys is now becoming like to Amazon what The Walking Dead became to AMC. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing for any show that like really hits the cultural zeitgeist because you can very much get out of it when you just become like for as much as people decry how Disney quote unquote like made Marvel and Star Wars like just content rather than events or things that people look forward to. I think, bro, I think like whatever decision in like the post COVID era, I still think that there is some merit to certain projects in the Star Wars brand banner and then in the Marvel banner. Where I think I mean, The Walking Dead is just its own can of worms. With Gen V, the first season had some initial promise with sort of the satirical edge of like superheroes in a college setting, but then it quickly devolved into sort of like we're basically doing like a lesser like version of like a mutants or the X-Men story, and then season 2 like does slightly a betterish version of that with Hamish Linklater playing Cypher, but then but the thing is where the story goes, it's like okay, we're just kind of waiting for a reveal that was kind of for the most part telegraphed in, and for the individual characters, it's like I don't feel like there is a sense of like direction beyond they're the means to advance the overall plot to put them in a position to be part of like the main boys like resistance. And I think because of that, it's like I don't feel like I'm like engaged. I watch all the episodes weekly, but I think for me it's like would I have missed much in not watching the show. And I don't think it's like necessarily bad, like it's like abhorrent or offensive or anything like that. I just feel like it's just okay. And I think for a franchise that started out such a fresh and dynamic way of approaching superhero genre that was different from comics and still was able to do something like notable and refreshing. I think Gen V in its second season, like you have sort of the fun machinations and plot stuff with Cipher, but I think the overall like have like why am I engaged? It's like I like the characters in certain like moments, but I just feel like it's like okay, we're just doing like young heroes like fighting against the system, and it's such a well worn trope at this point that I feel like the show could have tried to do some interesting stuff to really kind of push the envelope or maybe subvert expectations in that way. But I think it's just like really straightforward, and I don't know. It just there are certain things that I like, but the sum of its parts is less. So I think it was okay. I think people who watch it, you won't necessarily think it's bad, but I don't think it's necessarily think it's like a great experience. I think it was just very middle of the road. And I think that's kind of unfortunate for if you're watching like 8 hours television, you should ideally have some level of engagement. And it's just a big contrast when I'm engaged with like something like Dispatch, like a point and click like Telltale style game. Um, I don't know. I think when we go through the individual episodes, there'll be things I liked and things I don't like, but I just don't think there is a level of purpose beyond just moving pieces on the chessboard for those characters to be in the place to be part of the main narrative for season 5 of The Boys.
All right. I mean, look, overall, I felt, Gen V, I think it's a quality spin-off in terms of, providing supplemental content, kind of, I guess, supplemental context, to the world of the boys.
But
You know,
but
I,
but don't you think like the fact that that's but don't you think that's kind of the problem of itself is like if you the fact that it's like oh it's just additional material it's like well like the boys was making fun of things that were just like supplemental material to flesh out whatever franchise and I just feel like the show needs to be more than just fleshing out things that I could see in like a encyclopedia or like Bible of the world of the boys. Do you get what I mean? I'm not trying to dog on you specifically, but just kind of want to yeah.
right. Well, look, overall, I don't know. I mean, look, throughout the course of like streaming and superhero shows, we've been promised like okay, here's something supplemental that'll be just kind of like again fleshing out the world building that we won't necessarily need in the narrative. But if you know that, it does kind of add some layers to what you're seeing in the main narrative. And of course, we've kind of seen a lot of stumbling blocks in the MCU with that. In terms of like, that was the promise, and then ultimately it's like, well, what the heck? I mean, the Doctor Strange suit. What's WandaVision? You need that. It's kind of the go-to example, but it's kind of my point. And this is kind of like some world building that does kind of like line up the way I would kind of expect it to. And I want to be very clear though. I While I like Gen V, I share your concerns. I mean, really, ultimately, my worry is sustaining that. I mean, honestly, I was really worried going into season 2 of Gen V. That season 2, I was worried that it would be difficult to sustain like the quality of what I think Gen V season 1 was in terms of fitting as kind of like the spin-off. Because when they announced Gen V, I was initially very reluctant, like, okay, and we're kind of delaying things, and we're just kind of a placeholder. It's approved because of the popularity of the boys, and they want to keep the money train going. And I saw Gen V season 1, I was sold in like the Marie Moreau of it all, and that was my grounding element. And everything else was just kind of like, okay, and this just kind of tracks for the world of the boys. And then obviously, Homelander shows up at the end. And it's like, okay, we're folding things in there. And then obviously, when we get to the boys season 4, we're starting to call back things from Gen V that are going to be a central plot point for the last season of the boys. So these were things are kind of like that's kind of what sold me ultimately on Gen V, and it's kind of its placement kind of like in the development of the world. And season 2 of Gen V I think impressed me because I was getting a little bit more of that. But my fear with yours is what I was kind of trailing off to get to this point. My fear, kind of like yours, is that we're flying too close to the sun with the spin-offs. And I feel like we hit it good, but, you know, it's just, I feel we hit it good here, but by the same token, though, it just feels like all the other stuff that's in the pipeline, like,
I think
like the vault. For example, the vault show I'm kind of interested in because obviously I like Soldier Boy and I like Stormfront, and I am obsessed with Stan Egger. He's my favorite part of the boys. So the idea, I know he wouldn't technically be in like the vault show, I mean, unless they use him as a framing device. My point with that is like there's supplemental purpose within that to kind of show you know yes, it would be redundant in terms of we talked about this stuff very effectively. We don't quite need to show it, but I'm saying if we are going to get a spin-off with that, at least there's something like there's at least a story that you could potentially tell there, especially with Stormfront, like the whole Liberty Blast, or was it late? You know what the name was on her?
Lady Liberty.
Lady Liberty.
Yeah. or like yeah, Liberty.
Lightning. Well, you sure it wasn't lightning or something? It was.
No, specifically had Liberty. That Lightning was not part of her name because
Okay, it was
that
just.
whole reveal is that she's like this new superhero, but the reveal is that she's actually been like superheroing for a while and changed identities.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to remember what the specific name was. What you're saying, so it was just Liberty then.
Yeah, it's Liberty Lady or Lady Liberty. Something
Right.
it had Liberty the name.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I'm saying based on like the elements like that I really liked in the boys at that spinoff, that one kind of has my intrigue. But the problem with all of these spinoffs, especially the boys Mexico, and even with Gen V when it was announced, is that the time that's passing between seasons of the boys, and by the time they're able to wheel these out, I think the time has passed to do the spinoffs, and just by the it really feels like if the boys season 5 the ending, which is one of the things I always liked about the boys, that the boys does have an ending, and the show seems, especially with Kripke with his 5 season mission, per his experience of Supernatural, that is an appeal with the boys. That's a story that has an ending, and we potentially have we stumbled a little bit in season 4, but we may not have overstayed our welcome depending on how season 5 turns out. And but if they're going to keep turning these out and adding more pieces of the puzzle, there, it's just going to get increasingly more risky. We're already doing Gen V season 2 was kind of a risk, but I think it maintained the quality. It's just doing more like Boys Mexico. I think that ship is completely set. I don't need that at all. I don't care about that at all.
Yeah,
Vaught at least has things that I like from the boys in it that has.
But the thing is, it's like I think it's ultimately for me. It's not just about whether it fits in the puzzle and all that. I'm trying to think just on a fundamental level. Like Breaking Bad, one of the best, most critically acclaimed and beloved shows in the 21st century. And there's a spinoff announced with the lawyer from that show, and it seems like a crazy idea. But there's a why. And I haven't watched Better Call Saul like beyond just the first few episodes, but like I know in interacting talking to people, it's like there is a why. There is a fundamental drive and mission statement in telling Saul's like origin, his history and all that. And so it's not just, hey, we're wanting to rely on IP to drive up interest and have people stay on our streaming service, network, whatever. We have a story to tell about this character that warrants the full canvas, the wide resources, and all that stuff. And especially even El Camino, it's like a very Jesse Plemons spoke. Like you have a perspective, you have a point that you're making in following X or Y character from the big narrative. And I just feel like when you're trying to do a spin-off from a very popular, you need to have the why. You need to have something that can be appreciated without having to rely upon the connections to the prior thing.
Well,
And
in that spirit, Rohit, with this, I mean, again, we don't know. It is possible. Now, mind you, it's all speculative. So you're right. It's kind of a shame we don't know it going into it. But based on the whole Marie Moreau kind of focus and what we reveal this season about her, I'm saying between that and Tom, and Godolkin, it does seem that it would pay off. It might pay off in season 5, just based on those elements. You're right that we don't know, and that is a flawed premise from the.
that's not even my concern. I just feel like what you're citing is like, oh, these are just plot things we need that we can learn that impact the show. For me, if the show is connected to the bigger picture, it's not my concern. My concern and my one is if I'm spending time week to week, I want something that's driving the main narrative beyond just, hey, this will connect to the bigger narrative. I want, what is the why? What are you trying to say with these characters? What's the point? What's the like perspective? When the boys first came out, there was a perspective. There was something to be said about superheroes and how do you perceive as celebrities and like the corporate nature of it and all that. And the first 2 seasons are really great. There's season 3 and 4, I feel like fell from that and focused more on just the plot machinations and just people trying to like overcome Homeland or whatever. And I think Gen V, it's like, oh, like you're doing like a very like good satire commentary on college life and the young adult culture with
College insecurities, that kind of.
yeah, and then you kind of just go away from that in the middle end of season 1, and season 2 is just more of that. It's better in terms of like you have an interesting villain or like a very charismatic like Hamish Linklater Cypher, but like the twist was pretty telegraphed, and the guy who comes in as the real person behind Cypher and all that, he's not as interesting or charismatic or engaging as Hamish Linklater. And so like we're watching this guy who's just really a front for someone that's not as interesting. And so for me as a viewer, it's like, okay, if we're going away from saying something interesting about superheroes with the intersection of a young adults and all, like, because all of these characters play on specific commentaries or specific things with like Marie, self-cutting with suicide, Sam's, not like Sam's mental health issues, and Emma's like, bulimia, eating disorder, stuff like that. And I just feel like there are things that just characterize that just are things that are attributes, but they don't drive the narrative in any interesting way. That I feel like for me, it's like, okay, I'm just seeing them doing their version of, oh, we're the mutants. We're trying to, either deal with depression or try to stop a bad mutant from like rising the mutants up and try to take over humanity. It just feels like X-Men stuff that like I rather watch X-Men that do it much better, much more compellingly. And this is just like, all right, we're just kind of doing the lesser.
Basically, you're not in for like the Garth Ennis version of the X-Men. That's essentially what you're saying.
I mean, at least the Garth Ennis version of the X-Men, I feel like Garth Ennis would at least have something to say about the X-Men or about the idea of like a powered class of individuals and how and the contradiction of them feeling both powerful and persecuted, like stuff like that. And I just don't feel like we're engaging in anything like deeper underneath like the hood. Um and that's something that I kind of feel like I'm not trying to say that every show needs to kind of go into the highbrow, like existential drama of it all. Shows have to operate on right different levels depending upon the genre, what your attention is. And I feel like if you're in a world where like superheroes have a specific like connotation and there's like political, social, cultural ramifications and intersections with that, I feel like that should be the main thrust of the narrative rather than just things that are like window dressing and you're just kind of doing, hey, we're let's not be persecuted as with people with powers, or let's stop the bad people from using their powers with our powers, and it's just like there needs to be more there, and I feel like there's not more there. Just like it just feels like just like Gen V just feels like a CW show with just language, sex, and blood and it's if it's like kind of one of the better CW show seasons, but I just feel like there's not like a maturity, sophistication. And I know that this show had that, the boys, but it just feels like after that just kind of lost a sense of itself and focused more on like the characters, doing their machinations, just kind of mashing toys together. And I'm not trying to feel like the show is bad per se, but it just feels there's just not much there for me to latch on or really engage with. And I like certain characters, like certain things, but they just don't feel like the overall like thrust. They just are like things I like in isolation from episode to episode, but they're not the main focus of the narrative or even some episodes.
Okay, well, I guess just to maybe kind of break things down just a little bit about the stuff that happens in the season, a little more specifically. So a big thing for me with season two was I had kind of the story thing of like I think the big question for season two was how do we return to the status quo in the premise after the way we ended season one. And I was impressed how we pulled it off, which I think tracks with the world of the boys. We have like the firecracker exposition, which basically is it's the media spin of Vought covering up season one, putting it all on the Dean who conveniently died. Development of the soup virus. We pin the woods and everything on the former dean. And here's the, I guess overall, it's Gen V season two really seems to be dealing with the theme of transparency and truth, or at least the warped version of that in the world of the boys, where it's like the eerie. Obviously, the boys, especially in the later seasons, they're really banking on like eerie real world parallels, and I think with that, it's like the boys in Gen V. It's like brutal transparency in that at this stage in the world building of the boys, it's like we're owning up to doing bad things, but spinning it into a numbers game and optics and all this. where it's like we're going to say, oh yes, this bad stuff, because obviously we can't cover up anymore, but they're not spelling that part out. It's like, oh yeah, this bad thing happened, but look at the heroes who rise from it, and like it's like a bad apple spoils the bunch, but I mean not anymore. We're we welcome the people who got a bad rap, and we're entering the reclamation projects, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So Kate seems to have earned points with Homelander in season 4 when she showed up there to help him kind of overthrow things, and there's an attempt at redemption for her. Like she's kind of attempting redemption by getting her friends out of Elmira, which is basically kind of this black site kind of. It's kind of like Bell Reef's, kind of like a prison for the superpowered individual.
Mhm.
And getting them back to the school. So that whole thing there of like that the fact that with the boys, it's always like the biting truth kind of thing, where like Starlight was very much she tried to bring truth into the world, and that ultimately to me the sell of the boys as a concept, at least. I mean, even if the boys lost the step with season 4, which it did. Overall, what I love about the boys, and the reason I still think, even with all that said, I think it's still far better than the comic to me. That's just my opinion. Some people might really love the comic, and sure, again, we don't have a show without the comic, but I always liked that there was like a hint of like a running kind of theme or a feeling of optimism, despite like the cynical world in the boys. There was the hope that things would change, and we're rooting for the boys to kind of like come up against like this very cynical world, and like you're rooting for these guys to win. So there was like kind of like just that optimism, I think, that comes through versus just utter like it's pretty much the end times that the comic is, and then we basically there's always a debate to be had about like shock value in comics versus like
I I will say in some limited defense of Garth Ennis's comic, I feel like I feel like for Garth Ennis, he was kind of working a lot on his feelings about the superhero genre,
yeah, he was.
and specifically how it's such a predominant force in the comics medium. And this is a guy who like specifically loves war comics. He loved like his big things were like Preacher, Hitman, like things that are just comics that are for adults. And I think also to a certain extent, like I think he respects and understands where superheroes are, but I don't think I think what he did for the boys was that he was saying, look, this is how, like, when something that's so corporatized, is brought onto the public, there is just a level of like soullessness and crassness, and there's not a sense of like, and I think that's sort of what Ennis is saying, is that for these normal regular people without powers, they're it's metatextual in that we're trying to push back against the dominant super genre. We let other genres, other stories be prominent in the comics medium. And I think if you go to certain parts of the comic where it deals with like the creator and like how superheroes get come about in that universe of World War II, and the history of superhero comics, it's like it's very much kind of articulating how he feels about where the medium was at that time. And I think probably I think nowadays, I think there's some, maybe not as much merit, because I think the medium is healthy enough or has a lot of variety. But I think when he was writing this, superheroes were such the biggest game in town. There still are the biggest game in town, but I think there's just more of an appetite for non-superhero stuff. So I think Garth Ennis just very much didn't like how prominent the superhero genre is, and that was just how he's going to portray these heroes.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that like I guess because like sometimes there's like a thing of shock value with his work, where I mean,
Oh no, yeah, that's, I mean, bro, well, that's just
to me that's the divide between the comic and the show, where it feels like he unnecessarily doubled down on the horrific nature of things in the comic, where it feels like the show is like, okay, look, we're gonna still make it horrible, and like the issues and everything or she's trying to convey there is still there, but we're not going to like for example, like Starlight, her sexual assault that happens. We're not going to like triple it like the comic did.
No,
Like,
no, I think I will. I think I can appreciate the show having some level of restraint.
Yeah,
And I think part of that is that like it focused less on like, oh, look at what's the most depraved thing each superhero does, and it's more like how depraved is sort of the people's appreciation and adoration of superheroes do, not just for the heroes themselves, but for the public. And I think the fact that the show starts out with having strippers be like analogous to celebrities,
Yeah.
and how we kind of enable the worst, impulse of celebrities to do whatever the hell they want because they're beloved by the audience or the public. I think that's such a potent message. But I think the show, really started in an interesting place with having someone like Cypher doing like the ranking system, and
Mm.
because I think there's something you could have done about like how this looks more prominent in certain like competitive high schools and not so necessarily college, because colleges, there's great inflation or whatever. But I think there's something of merit to like people, young adults really try to strive to be better than their peers because, there are not as many jobs, positions. There's a lot of social climbing of people. And I feel like that should have been more at the forefront, and it'd been interesting for a lot of the characters we're following, like kind of really kind of internalizing that like doggy dog mindset. But the fact that these characters resisting, it's there's not the tension. Like, okay, these guys are just kind of have to survive through like basically like Hunger Games, but the Hunger Games was about like how depraved and messed up the society is. We have the rich class basically taking poor kids from impoverished areas and pitting them against each other just for the sport of it, just for their entertainment. And I just feel like there wasn't like a potent point to be made, or at least if there was, it which wasn't put at the foreground. With Cypher's kind of taking a more aggressive approach and being the dean of Godolphin.
So I guess just to kind of move on to Cypher. So again, Hamish Linklater. He's an actor I've really liked when he pops up in things. I know a lot of people like him for what was that show he does on Netflix, Black. Do you
It's a Midnight Mass.
It did Midnight Mass. That was like Black Mass for saying Midnight Mass. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people love him for that. I remember him. I'm sure you do too. I mean, we remember he popped up. He was like Victor Von Doom's number 2 guy in the Tim Story Fantastic Four. It's the first time I saw him.
And he voices
Mm-hmm.
Batman and Batman Cape Crusader,
and he does a great job doing that. By the way, he's great.
Yeah, the show has its flaws. But
well, yeah,
also,
it's not perfect, but he's good in it though.
But for those who, I don't know how many people have watched The Newsroom, Aaron Sorkin's HBO show that lasted 3 seasons. He was in either the second or third season as this reporter Jerry that basically causes like a fake news story and puts like the newsroom in a lot of hot water. He's great in that that show as well.
He's also, he's not a stranger to sitcoms as well. He was in The Crazy Ones, and of course, I think the thing a lot of people I know from is he was the brother in The New Adventures of Old Christine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's been around the block. He's like, and I think he's a great character actor that like when put in a role that he can sink his teeth into, he's really good. So I'm hoping
So when he showed up, I was really excited that he was going to be in this. And I think he killed it, man. He did a fantastic job.
Yeah, but then when light of the twist, it's like.
What's the writing, though? I'm just talking about his performance, and it's the
like honestly, like Hamish Linklater, like he deserved. Honestly, if Bob Odenkirk could be the lead of a show and Rhea Seaborn could be the lead of a show and Pluribus, like Hamish Linklater needs to be the lead of his own TV show.
I mean, he can absolutely do it. I mean, he kind of is with the Cape Crusader, but
isn't
he the main character in Midnight Mass, or is he not the main character in Midnight Mass?
No, it's like kind of more of an ensemble show. It's a miniseries. I just figure like if Hamish Linklater was the lead in like an HBO, Netflix, like any of the big streaming services, if he's the lead and he's getting like Emmy nominations and then goes into like movies and not like I think he's the guy, if he put in the right place, can really have his career go and like sort of like think of Walton Goggins and think of where his career is now. I see that the stars aligning for Hamish Linklater.
Oh sure. So yeah, the most interesting addition. Just he's this no nonsense dean who's very enigmatic with a plan. He's just so callous in doing whatever it takes to basically breed the strongest soups at the college. Basically, to do ultimately to kind of supplant Homelander. It's ultimately what he's going for there. And we see. I love you can see in Linklater. He's really having fun with the role. Just honestly, I think the best way I can boil down what kind of Linklater's doing here is it's kind of he's kind of doing what David Tennant does, the Purple Man. There's a lot of what the vibe I get with Cypher, especially with his power set.
Mhm.
Kind of what we see there. And I think that's like a lot of fun. The role, especially when he reveal he has powers. That's when he goes to the, kind of the full Purple Man of it all, the full Kilgrave. Just, I mean, I really, I was kept, even if a lot of people saw it coming, I don't know, I was wrapped up in what he was doing. I kind of liked I liked how we unfolded kind of I like how we unfold. This guy had a plan. I think the best part about the season for me with what he was doing is like, especially after we get the twist and you really think back on it, it's like he really did have kind of like a reverse Flash plot from the Flash season one in terms of he is making he's giving his essentially his enemy his foil the tools for his becoming. You know, which is, of course with the reverse Flash is that it's kind of this the cyclical, you know, for the reverse Flash to exist, he has to, you know, basically allow, you know, create the Flash. He has to create his arch enemy, which is the really great heady twist of the Flash, and I love that. And here it's kind of the thing where you could argue that, you know, a lot of what he's doing is really in the moment the way it's written, it does seem kind of like a bonus for him in getting his old body back, but it does feel you could argue maybe that was part of his plan too. That if he were to kind of, you know, kind of know that they would eventually, because we established his character is smart. You know, he's dating Sister Sage, so I mean it's possible. But
Mhm.
just the idea that, you know, he kind of manipulated things just enough that okay, they're going to see this burned husk of a man and like try to help him so they can get, you know, get one on good, you know, so they can get one on Cipher. When in reality, you know, that husk is in fact, you know, is in fact Godolkin. It is, you know, the real Cipher.
Yeah.
So I mean, everything worked in his favor there, and he kind of trained her to not only, again, first and foremost, to serve his mission of like I want to build a better suit than Homelander, but also like, hey, if she can heal people, you know, that helps
Mhm.
me out. So I just really liked, you know, I liked this plan. I liked that he had that kind of the entanglement with you know, Marie's. You know, he's probably the one that injected her mother with, or the babies with the compound V. So he was there when he delivered her. So you know, he is, you know, very much like, you know, the author of her pain. I really liked all that with, you know, with the bond that they had, despite her bumping up against it as much as she did.
Yeah.
You know, I thought all that was great, and we had like all these weird, twisted, kind of crypty, Ennis-y kind of stuff. I know it's not really Ennis, but just, you know, the kind of that the sick and wrong kind of stuff where he's just, you know, he's seemingly caring for the body, but he's also abusing it. Now, what? Let me ask you this: when he abuses the, you know, like the actual body, the Tom Godolkin body,
Mhm.
do you uh, do you think that's Doug? You know, the actual body, the actual person that Cipher, you know, Cipher is, who's being, you know, kind of Cipher. They did
No,
kind
no,
of the Mandarin kind of thing with him ultimately,
no,
the whole like Cipher being like the fake,
no,
you
no,
know,
no, no, no. This is this is Godolkin. Act
hating
like
his own weakness. That's just
yeah, yes, and that I think is so it's such a rich
yeah.
psychological depth, and that and it kind of informs how he goes about wanting superhero supremacy. Because when you think about it, it's like, um, have you read Preacher or know from or like because I remember there's like a scene, there's like a panel, there's like a flashback in the Preacher comic where like Jesse's dad like goes up to like a clan member or whatever. It's like, why is it that the worst of us wants like to be like white supremacist or whatever? And I think there's something interesting about for like Adolkin that, you know, was basic in this very feeble body. It just further reinforced this like very ego fueled desire to, you know, have people with his, you know, similarity being a soup like assert supremacy in his mind. It's like he like, yeah, it's one thing for soups to be to be in charge, but he in his mind he wants to be in charge, and they're just kind of one and the same. And suits are just a mean. So if anything, he shares a lot of commonality with Homelander. Though I think the difference is that Homelander on a deep level just wants to be loved and just can never trust or feel safe to be loved genuinely and without fear.
Yeah.
Whereas Godolkin, he is just kind of basically like a superhero incel in a certain extent. I feel like he has a little bit of overlap with, say, Todd from Megamind. And it's kind of interesting to comparison where it's like people who maybe are not the most successful in life.
Wait, did you say Todd?
Tanner, or is it who is the
Hal. I think you mean the
Hal?
Jonah Hill character who
Hal,
becomes
yes.
tight.
Jonah Hill's character, Hal. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying top, but it's like Hal. It's like these are guys that like when they get a little bit of power, they get drunk off of it and just like the feeling of being in constant control and having everyone submit to their will and their domination. And so him wanting to like have the best, like the fact that like he was disgusted, and I know we're kind of jumping around, like with that one guy that just kind of poops out like clones of him, like he wants like the best of the best. And I think that just it's him, externalizing his sense of dissatisfaction with where his life's at. Like, he feel like he should be like better. Homelander should like kneel to him. And I think that level of ego, that level of like seek of dominance, just comes out so well in Linklater's performance.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Godolkin's whole thing is that he birthed the superhero. He came up with Compound V, or I think he came up with it. If he didn't come up with it, he perfected it. I think that's the. Do you remember if he created or just perfected Compound V?
No. Compound V is made by Frederick Watt.
Well, I know. That's what I'm saying. So Frederick Vaught. I'm just saying he's the one who came up with. He used the serum that was specifically used for Soldier Boy and Stormfront, which is why it was successful before he got burned alive. So what I'm wondering is, so Frederick Vaught literally discovered it. So did this guy perfect it, or did he just use what Frederick Vaught had, and that's like, and he just got the hero thing because he was like the one scientist who
No. I think he just kind of got lucky, and then the perfection is when he's like when he took over Doug. I think the perfection is the like Odessa project.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that's the thing. So he.
At least that's
I'm
why
just saying he had a bunch of science. They took that serum, and so we had this opening flashback in the season. I thought it was kind of interesting how it paid off in a big way with what the whole cipher revealed. So I like that we kind of opened on this. What you think is like, okay, this on one hand it just seems like, okay, it's just a reminder this is where the Godolkin name comes from, and on the flip side, it's like, okay, I guess in the grand scheme maybe it's a bit of a. I was thinking maybe it was a bit of a pilot for like a little thing that might tie into the. Might tie into the Vought show, the spinoff they might be doing down the line. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like the direct kind of setup and payoff with that, it was neat. But that thing was that in the '60s or in the '40s that opening?
That was the '60s.
It was the '60s. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, yeah. So okay, yeah, you're right there. So definitely a pretty cool. Absolutely, they made that thing. So okay, they just got their hands on it. You know what? Maybe they replicated it. Maybe that's what it was, and maybe he was the one who replicated it better, perhaps. Because he tried warning him not to take it, so he knew something, but he then ended up taking it anyway. So I had to imagine like he had his own.
Well, I think because they were trying to see, because I think my understanding is because I think the big thing is that for a while, like you couldn't be able to administer like Compound V successfully on like adults because the chances of like any adult like having powers and it being stable enough to operate out of the world is such a small. That's why like it was so noteworthy for Stormfront and Soldier Boy when they became supers because like I think I gathered there's just a lot of people didn't weren't able to successfully have powers with their adults, and that's why they had to like inject in utero or as babies because it's easier for them to kind of eventually develop the powers in puberty and all that stuff. So I think it was just in that time where they were just trying to see if they could be able to administer Compound V like to like able-bodied adults, and obviously it still wasn't successful. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway. Let's see. So, yeah. Well, anyway. So also, we had like we see them really put everyone through their paces. We have like the little training room thing, which I mean is something kind of tantamount to the the danger room from the X-Men. It's more of a more like a school trial thing. It's not like 1-to-1, but it's we have Vicar. Vicar, the very Thor-esque kind of like Viking-esque kind of like Soup, who is he's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
So I love the simplicity. Just push the button, but you gotta get through that guy. I thought that was pretty neat. I mean, honestly, overall, with the scene like with that conceit, it feels like it's a way of working an action into a show that's essentially, I mean, it's more of an espionage show in terms of like, the undercover kind of like we're working against the ultimately kind of turned into somewhat of an espionage kind of thriller kind of show in which we're, there's not a lot of fight going on like we had in The Boys.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens very sporadically because the whole thing is like, there's the threat of death, but not really like a lot of super battles.
Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, yeah, because really the show is like it's just kids in a college campus, so there's not really going to be a lot of like moments of action
Yeah.
beyond just sort of similar environments. So that's kind of where that's sort of the cheat or the way to show some level of action.
Now we should talk about Andre.
Mm-hmm.
So the way in which they handled Andre, I mean, it's unfortunate that we had the right, they had the right Andre out due to the passing of Chance Perdomo.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the way in which they did folding it into the story, I thought it was a good call because and also how it motivated certain actions and guilt, and it wasn't like in a way it's still kind of a tribute to what he meant to everyone, and
Yeah,
on and off the show. I
it's,
thought it was a good call.
yeah. I think like the fact that it was established that Andre had like a debilitating version of this illness. And considering that's kind of what well, he didn't cut that one girl's throat because of his illness because he just wasn't paying attention. But I understand, but like throughout the course
Well,
of the
no, no,
first,
no. It's not that he. Wait, don't tell me if I have this right. Isn't it that he didn't have the illness, but his father did? So there's the potential that it basically kind of followed logic. Okay, so his father would get an illness from overuse of the powers, his son might, and he didn't really know that, and that's why he pushed
I,
himself to death.
I thought he was feeling the effects of it because I think there was a like he had to like self medicate with weed or whatever.
I don't know about that. You might be right, but it's been a while. You could be right. I just
Yeah,
don't
because
remember
that's
that part.
because I think like the fact that like he was really self conscious about using his powers. Because I know because he was in the remember he was in the ambulance, and I think his powers going haywire, and it caused the ambulance to like be messed up or whatever, and his dad was with him.
Right. Well, that's more of like just the uses, not the danger of use.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry,
no,
it's the
but
danger of using this, but I mean like the danger to
no, no,
himself.
no.
Like,
But his powers going haywire because he has that the same like debilitating condition as like a like both his parent like both him and his dad have that same debilitating condition. That's like the like outcome of you have their magnetic powers.
right.
That's why I figured it's like he was already kind of having showing symptoms of it, and then the fact that it just kind of like worsened and progressed. I also think, and I know this is not really spelled out. I really believe that Cypher like made Andre like he speeded up the rate of his illness just to see like how far his body can take before it would go off. I mean, obviously it's not necessarily spelled out, but I would imagine like the conditions of being in like an enclosed environment and just him trying to like escape out, like it was very much like in Cypher's interest to observe like how bad Andre would decline over time.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea that Andre, he tried to save everyone by like ripping that door off, but he just it just pushed them too far. Now, whether you're right, I mean, whether there's a lot of lead up with Cipher and I would track, and it would probably also, I think, it adds to it. But still, it's the fact that this poor kid,
Yeah.
he played, kind of died heroically for his friends. It was kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and also Polarity's arc of coming to grips with the kind of essentially his cowardice in season one, but also just again the understandable like corporate cowardice that everyone's like in
Yeah.
Vaught's shadow and fearful of them, and that
I,
kind of
I wish we got to see him be like an actual teacher, and then it'd be interesting to see like how does he go about like maybe like does he put on a front? Does he try to like subtly manipulate his students to maybe like question the Dogon doctrine? Because I feel like he just comes as a professor. It doesn't seem like he's doing much teaching. I think because I feel like the college just feels like a setting for the younger characters to operate. But like if they're students, why aren't we just having them like deal with certain things, with sort of their teachers or classmates and all that stuff. I feel like the first season, like, remembered that this was a college show and had things like going to a frat party, trying to remember what happened the night before, like, or like, you know, just things that are like basically like the equivalent of like a school shooting or like like massive unrest when people are coming to visit the school, like stuff like that. And I just feel like there wasn't much of like utilizing the college experience and doing this like the kind of the boy spin on it in the season as it was last season.
Well, I mean, you're right. We didn't do a lot of it. We did get one glimpse at it, though. Again, we saw him in the midst of teaching a class. I mean, the assumption I made was that based on the very little that we saw, is that he's really just doing it for the undercoverness of it all, so he can be on campus. So he's just pretty much pushing the Godolkin doctrine, but he's not.
True, I get that. I just wish it's like I think of it this way. It's like imagine a version of the season where like Cypher is like just randomly visiting his classroom and Polarity is just like trying to kind of toe the line where he knows Cypher knows what he's doing, but they're basically like doing a lot of like social manipulation, and that would be some level of tension and something that would make Polarity just beyond like him going through the grief, him having to kind of be have some level of social smarts and figure out how to like fight within the system to whatever degree. Like that would have been interesting. But I just think that we didn't have that. It's like, well, really, we just get a lot of sort of Polarity's involvement is just with Emma, which is kind of weird because Emma didn't really get to interact with Andre that much that first season. And if anything, it should be Polarity and Kate. Considering Kate was like romantically involved with Andre, after and during his time with Golden Boy.
Yeah, it's not. It's a good point. I mean, honestly, I think the reason they went with Emma is because they were doing the whole, Emma's self confidence thing. They kind of as a way of like, size, shifting size without, like the food and the
See,
bulimia.
and I think because the thing is, I feel like there was a missed opportunity because here's the thing: like Emma, like has sort of the whole like she's not like a superhero in the first season. She's trying to be like a social influencer because her power is not really like combat oriented or whatever. And I feel like for Polarity, who is a general superhero with combat powers and all that stuff, it would have been interesting for maybe. And the thing is, he's a very popular guy. He's got like a lot of like social media cloud, or like he's very much a public facing individual. I think it'd be interesting for those two to kind of like maybe butt heads, not like an antagonistic way, but like maybe have Emma see what the value is in putting on the very public image, while also like being a superhero. And maybe for Polarity, he could learn to kind of be willing to kind of not like bend to the crowd and maybe just do things for himself rather than like his followers or his like shareholders or whatever like business he's operating or involved in. And the fact they didn't do that, it's like, well, you're just kind of doing a lot of shenanigans, and like, yeah, it's kind of funny in certain moments, but it's like, well, what do I appreciate in them interacting? Like, there's not really a sense of like them getting to know each other, getting over certain differences, and like being different from where they started.
Fair point. I mean, I do like her kind of having with the former influencer aspirations. Yeah, I do like seeing her kind of rally the troops and really kind of connecting with people. I thought that was good for her.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have
I think
been.
Emma's actress is very likable too. I don't know.
No,
There's something.
she is, but it's like I think it's like it would have been interesting for there to been like a counter social influencer that's like very much under Cypher's employ, and it'd been interesting for Emma to try to think like how do I beat someone in the social media game,
Right.
because that's like because obviously with these being young adults, I think there was some of that in like Boy season 3, really more so in 4, but I think like when you're a young adult, like there's just a level of like pettiness and shifting the goalposts and moving the chess pieces in a way where like you don't come out good in the process, when slinging mud or whatever. And I feel like there's just for all these characters there isn't something where like they're necessarily challenged and have to reevaluate who they are as people and then go through a process where they're in a different place. I just feel like for all these characters they're kind of more or less where they ended at the end of the show or where they were at the beginning of the show, outside of Kate. But I feel like to a certain extent, I feel like Kate, wasn't really too much of a bad person or like a villain. So her coming back into the light is not like it required. I mean, obviously, it required people to like accept what she did was wrong, but it just wasn't like she was off the deep end and had to slowly climb her way back to like recognize who her former self was. So I just that's sort of the thing where I think these characters are likable and can be fun to watch, but it's never like, oh, these characters are changing, growing, developing. Whereas I think for the boys, even the season 3 or 4, it's like you at least have some these characters like learn things about themselves and change and orient to, and maybe have to do things that they wouldn't normally not done in earlier seasons because the stakes are so higher. And I just feel like these characters could get a little bit of that.
I mean, with Kate, I felt, I think she was kind of in the A train position where, I mean, when we started the boys, I hated A train, but again, it's because I was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, it was like they kind of pulled the hat trick of like they kind of may just slowly but surely kind of like okay, I'm kind of getting past my mad hatred on A Train. I'm kind of seeing the redemption there, and we kind of did that with Kate here. And I think the by way in which we did that was she really deserved the cold shoulder she got in like the first episode,
Sure.
for mind controlling and mind wiping everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
I think taking her power away with the whole the accidental skull cracking at the gas station. I think
Yeah.
it was necessary for her to be punished, and really for screwing everyone over. I think she really had to get a taste of her own medicine for like taking, and especially by the same token, there is like pity you have for Kate, in which she's basically Cipher is like the truly villainous version of what Kate could have been.
Yeah, I kind of wish like Cypher, like in a cruel level of dramatic irony, like used her powers against her, and she was basically like a puppet, and she's like eternally screaming about it, and like now she feels what it is when she mind controls or takes over other people's autonomy.
I mean, we kind of had that a little bit, though. Like
A
the whole
little bit, but like
like
it,
he's really mean to her, and I think she is kind of like seeing like the she's in a very helpless position, kind of like
yeah,
she's.
but I think it's like I think for all intents and purposes, it's like for Kate's like backstory when we see in the first season, it's like she just couldn't be able to touch or interact with people, and then obviously she's able to have some level of life because she has the gloves on, and does not try to mind control people, at least in the public on a public level. But then obviously with what happened with Golden Boy and everything, she has she utilized her powers in a sinister way. So I think it would have been interesting for her as a character to really think about, oh, I was doing this for like the greater good, whatever. Well, it's like the greater good isn't meaningful if for the person who's like autonomy and free will you just basically taken out. They're just a toy. And I think I don't know if you would have gone that far, but I just think the fact that like you know, for a person who uses mind control and sort of the like purple man implications of it in like Jessica Jones, I don't know if you would have necessarily gone that far, but I think it would be interesting for Kate to maybe think about like, hey, this power like could really mess with someone. And you don't have to hurt you don't have to even put a mark on their body. You don't have to injure them. It's just the fact that like you can be a puppet and you're in the backseat being aware of everything potentially. There is a disquieting feeling about that, and I just feel like for Kate it's like, okay, I won't use my powers, but I'll use them
Except for
for
that one guy, just gave Kilgrave his coat. But
yeah, and I just think
that
like
one guy was a whiner. Let's be honest. It's
no,
like,
no,
and I gave him my coat. I didn't want to give him my coat.
yeah, and so I think for Kate it's like I just think like her just kind of being the outs in the group. I didn't feel like that's like that much punish. Like, I really think it's weird that like even though she has some level of punishment, like Sam is like yeah, he just feels a little disconnected and not engaged. But I feel like he's not really like it wasn't Kate that also betrayed the group. It was also Sam, and I just feel like it's not weird. Well, it is a little peculiar that
She did
Sam.
mess with him a lot, though.
True, but I also feel like Sam in his own way, like was willing to accept that love. Like he's a powerful guy, and I feel like he in a way was submitting or wanting that kind of level of control from Kate. And I just feel like there's something that maybe Emma could at least point him out and had him take the task as like, hey, you're a really powerful guy that had to be contained by the school in the woods. Uh, you would not like if you wanted to, you would not let like Kate even touch a hair on you. But the fact you did shows in some way you're willing to sacrifice your humanity just so that way you can be one of the normal people. And at the end, and it seems like at the end of the day, even being normal is doesn't feel isn't even a good isn't even a good feeling at all. He just basically drugged up, and I just feel like for Sam, it's just weird. Not weird. It's a missed opportunity for Sam to not really like have that level of introspection, and also confront Kate on basically taking advantage of him being in such a vulnerable, like messed up place. And it's like you mislabeled my brother and you blame me, and I think that would have been also an interesting thing to harp on. And I don't know, I just feel like the way that like Kate is just held accountable is just people are mad at her, but I feel like there's not like a moment of searching for one's soul.
I
But
really liked. Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
but I think like that's the thing, right? For I think the show, it's like it's focused on like, oh, how do we overcome, Cypher? And I feel like the psychologies or the things that people can like the shit that people have gone through, I feel like should have been more at the forefront, and that impacts how they deal with Cypher or how Cypher like just like deals with them. But I feel like their emotional trauma isn't utilized in a way that like pushes the story forward or even prevents them from like achieving their goals. It's just there. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did really like the scene where Sam visits his parents.
Yeah, and I do like Sam realizing sort of how mental illness was just is just part of his family history. And I think it would have been I think it's interesting for him to kind of like accept that the powers didn't make him crazy. He just was like that, and so now he has to kind of really think about managing his mental illness. And I
Kind of the
think
old
that's
Jason Todd question, Lazarus Pit drove him crazy, or was it in there all along, kind of a thing.
well, I feel like
It's not the same. I'm just saying,
yeah,
kind of in
because
terms of
the
the
thing
whole.
is like Jason Todd when he was he wasn't really mentally ill. He was just had anger management issues and just had a very cynical like he the thing is he was a kid out on the street that was stealing hubcaps from the Batmobile. He did not have a good normal childhood. He grew up too fast, and I think that was the tension for a lot of modern stories to do flashbacks to his time as Robin. He was just not Dick Grayson, and that I think in my mind that just is a bit really side tangent. I think Bruce's treatment of Jason in his mind, I think Jason really resents the fact that he just wanted another Dick Grayson, and when he didn't get that, he didn't adjust accordingly and met Jason's needs. And that's the tragedy of how Bruce treated Jason. But that's a whole other thing we can just in other stuff. But I think for Sam, I think it's really good for him to really grapple with the fact that hey, without powers, he still would have had these mental health issues, and his powers just make his mental health issues like even more like salient. So I would have been nice for him to maybe think about going on medication or seeing it there, but like this, I think would have been something where he's really making efforts to better himself and not taking the easy way out. And I just feel like we don't really get like, oh, I'm messed up, and like, oh, I'm aware that this messed up thing was before I even had powers at the start, and now not necessarily I'm not better, but I'm just accept that. And I feel like I wanted a little bit more catharsis with Sam's arc, because I feel like Sam is just there, which is crazy to me. Because like the first season, I feel like all the characters have had arcs or moments where they were dealing with sort of how their powers reflected or externalized a lot of like emotional, social stuff. And I think the second season we just lose a lot of that, and it's all about like, all right, how are we utilizing our powers to deal with the big bad guy? Now, like, hey, how do we even like just tread above water with our crap, with our emotional trauma, and be able to like stand a chance to defeat this guy that's wanting to rally our classmates to take over the world.
Hmm. Well, and one thing with Sam, I still like that we maintain. Like one of the best things about his mental state is the puppet idea. Just the idea, like he's still hallucinating puppets because of like it's kind of what he had when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sandwich, with the googly eyes on. I don't know. It's still pretty fun.
Yeah.
We don't quite have that sequence though, like like kind of that like what we had in the first season of Gen V, where we have like the fight, where she's doing all these horrific things, but the puppets, and then we see the
Mm-hmm.
bloody aftermath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh let's see. So we get a little taste of just kind of the world of the boys too, with like the Patriots and the Dog Knot. In terms of what brings kind of Marie back. We send basically a dog the bounty hunting soup after her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I sorry, I guess the better kind of thing to go on here. So Marie Moreau.
Yeah.
So I think looking at her here, this season, I think we kind of see that she is to some degree, either cut from the same cloth or more so like just in the same role of Starlight here, only with a much more traumatic origin.
See, and I appreciate that, and I like what was done with her the first season. I really don't like her being like this like appointed chosen one figure to go up against Homelander with the Odessa project. It was like, okay, now we're just taking like this character that had this kind of interesting origin story, and her having to go through the trauma of like her sister not wanting to see her and killing her parents, all that stuff. And she's now like, oh, all this was part of this like longer term, was part of like making you a weapon, and you'll go up to defeat Homelander. It's like, okay, this just feels like we are just we are focusing on plot, and like, hey, this is going to lead to the big end game fight or whatever. And it's like, these characters were interesting because their powers were part of like the social makeup of them being young adults, and I just feel like now it's like they're just powers or abilities for them to do like R-rated action scenes. And I think I just, for me, it's like, okay, like for someone who's just watching the boys, it's like, okay, I have this character that I have to watch like 2 seasons of to understand like what's going on in seasons 5. And it's like, okay, we're doing a disservice to audiences where pivotal plot points or whatever are in spin-offs. And then at that point it's like we're just kind of going away from providing quality television. We're just like, hey, here are just basically like we're just doing Wikipedia entries in like hour blocks of TV, and I think that's just not worthwhile for people to make or people to watch. But
Yeah, I mean, that said, I do love that we still have like things I think are consistent with like Marie's writing in the first season. Like I love the scene with her and Pam. I think it was her aunt who basically secretly kind of raised her sister and kept her from her sister. I thought that was a heartbreaking scene, which is kind of getting to the heart of the whole thing of this poor girl.
yeah,
She didn't ask for any of this, and she's getting unfairly blamed for the killing of her family, and they injected her. It's not
mm-hmm.
it's not her fault. It was a girl. Kind of the throes of I guess the early stages of womanhood kind of happening. It's not really it's not her fault. And again, it's just we put the chosen one thing with Marie Moreau is again it's this frustrating position to be in because we don't really know how well it's going to pay off until we get the full ending and the full context.
It's for me. It's not a matter of whether it pay. I mean, it can be annoying if it doesn't pay off well. But I just feel like it's I have an issue with it on a foundational level. The idea of taking this character who we like as this just like kind of girl that like doesn't come from like a privileged or well-to-do background, that just kind of has the hustle and grind and being and have a little bit of luck and making her way and rise up the ranks. And now with that, she's like this chosen one. Is like, well, how can I really care or appreciate what like Marie has gone through if in a way it's like her destiny was kind of written in the stars? And so That's the thing. I feel like it. I
Are you
feel like
saying giving it like the Odessa layer of it all really takes the intrigue out of the character for you? Is that what you're saying? Or
not really intrigued. It just takes my interest in her wanting to like succeed or win out. Because if you have this character be a chosen one, it's like, and you're not kind of having this character deal with the expectations or pressures of being a chosen one, and to kind of do things that like maybe complicate like her set destiny. You just kind of foretell like, all right, this character is going to be pivotal to change the narrative and win, and whatever complication she has, she'll just eventually win at the end. But I think without the whole Odessa thing, it's like this is a young black girl who's going against the system that wasn't made for people like her, and the fact that she's kind of hustling, grinding with people who are not from who are not privileged or have some level of disability one way or another. Like you're invested in these characters, trying to just eke it out for the next day against the VOT system and all that. But the fact that she's like, oh, she and Homelander are on the same power level and all that, it's like, okay, we just went from this story about this girl, like, through muster, through courage, make like have her own sense of convictions and self-esteem. Now she's kind of has the safety net of like, okay, like you're the chosen one, and if you don't succeed the chosen one, then like why even put, like, that's the thing. It's like when you put that into the story, it just makes the story less interesting, and then you just kind of predetermines an outcome that if you kind of deviate from, that deviation is not going to be any way interesting and noteworthy, because you already have Chekhov's gun. If it doesn't fire like down the line, then why even put it there?
so
That's, I
some
think, yeah.
no, go on.
I think that's the issue with the whole Odessa thing. Is like, okay, now I just kind of not like, now I'm not worried if Marie's gonna do it. If she's destined to have that power, it's like it's gonna be like there's gonna have to be a Deus Machina or some other like added plot element that's gonna make it not possible for her to win out against Homelander. And then at that point, it's like, okay, like we're just focusing on the power scaling of it all, and like the potential for her to win in a fight versus how does her powers impact what her life's going to be overall.
So something with, I guess, the chosen one kind of thing. I guess more just with Marie in general this season. I I'm really mixed on the whole what we did with Annabeth. Uh like revealing, Cypher's trump card was that he had Annabeth. Um, the way basically using her as as a traumatic experience to kind of motivate like the next level kind of power up in her. The idea like, I have your sister, slits her throat, and then basically motivates Marie to heal her, which basically unlocks like the Homelander level game changer kind of power that the chosen one need destiny, if you will.
Mhm.
The whole thing of like, I like the idea. Okay, so we had the relative that like raised Annabeth in secret and all that, and kept her away from her. That was a great kind of heartbreaking scene. That I think I already said, but giving Annabeth powers though, making her a precog, that to me that was kind of on the erring on the side of the whole chosen one thing I didn't like. The whole thing of like, and these events are going to happen, and the whole thing like Marie kind of had to temporarily turn against the team and everything, and the whole that I didn't like that. It felt a little easy. Did you ever hear about the theory? Because I was wondering this. Given when she showed up, I was thinking, "Oh wow, there might be some credence here." That Sage was going to be essentially. Again, this is before. I don't know. Obviously, I forget
Well,
when
the
we
like
had
sister stage was like related to Marie Moreau, like
that.
what?
We going before the season started. That was a theory going around, and I forget like when this.
That's when people. I feel like that's like people on fan theory brain. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's maybe a little too far. It's on the level of when people thought like Phil Coulson was going to be Vision.
Well, the vision, the Colson vision thing. I don't know. There's something that I don't know that one felt like the whole thing. If you knew he was going to go, and ultimately they did go in the direction of he turned into a robot with the LMD thing. So I mean, there was a little bit of credence with the Vision thing, a little bit.
I mean, no, there was not like that was something that the showrunners like eventually went to, but like Phil Coulson was a lot like he was just brought back from the dead.
Yeah.
and he has memories wiped. It's like that's different from like him being like a role. Like that was something that was just done way, basically like it was past the point where like the TV show was ever meaningfully connected with the movies in the
Yeah.
MCU as a whole. So like I just think for like I do definitely understand your point, but Annabeth is that her being a precog, it's like
It's too easy. It just
it shortcuts the drama, it cuts attention, and I think it would have been interesting for Annabeth to be
it
like a
makes her really hypocritical. Like, okay, so her powers killed the why? Well, why do you blame her? I mean, you also have
well,
powers.
well,
Just you didn't get
well,
a
well,
lethal
well,
power.
I think it was like I think what they did at the end, it makes sense in this in the context. It's like she was a young kid and she didn't know how to process the fact that she could have prevented or foretold what happened, but do anything. And then instead of just her ruminating, like she just kind of lashed it on to her sister. And that's like a character defect or fault that like she has to come to terms with. So I think that's not bad in of itself. I think the whole her being a precog altogether, it's like okay, we just because I think it would have been really interesting for Annabeth to just been a regular human,
Yeah.
and then because I think she would have been like the Huey of the group, where it's like
Yeah.
she can rely upon her like her abilities to get out of a situation. She has to use her wits and I feel like that would have been something that would have added the drama because like everyone else can fight other superhuman or their supes or whatever, but she can, or then she has to kind of like either be in the foreground, manipulating stuff or whatever, or just be able to like fight against other regular humans if that came to that. But if I just had powers, it's like okay, well, you know, I think her being a precog and having the ability, I think it would have been interesting if Annabeth was introduced at the like onset of the second season.
Hmm.
And it's like, hey, your sister's alive, and then that changed, and then that would have been such an interesting dynamic, and like she becomes like a student at Godolphin U, or whatever, and like there's big social media, like it's crazy to me that Cipher didn't think to bring Annabeth as like a tool to manipulate Marie, right?
Yeah.
Because think about like how much like Cipher is wanting to willing to prey upon and force these characters to improve. Why didn't Cypher think they're just like, hey, if you don't improve or will to do what I want, your sister is going to either be dead or work for me. And then points to Kate. It's like, look at what happened to Kate. Do you really want your sister like that? I think is like Cypher isn't a guy who has any boundaries or rules. He's willing to do anything and everything for his own agenda, for his own thing. And I feel like it's weird that like he didn't utilize um, like Annabeth. And also, the fact that he's precog is like, why didn't think to like manipulate Annabeth and maybe make Marie out to be this potential villain, considering she has this negative things. Why didn't he manipulate Annabeth to like be an antagonistic force to Marie in whatever way possible? So I don't know. There's just stuff like that. Like there's just a lot of missed opportunities and like interesting directions to go with the story. And I just feel like the focus was, hey, how do we just do this like cool plot where you're trying to figure out how do you beat this like super smart, super powerful bad guy who the big reveal is, oh, it's not actually him, it's like this body, this like corpse of a body, and like people like clock that in within the first few episodes. So it's like, okay, why like this is such an easy reveal, easy twist. Like it's kind of we're just not like that's the thing about when you're doing like a mystery plot or like hey here's this who is so and so or what is actually going on, like when the reveal happens. I think for me my issue for things like that is like you don't have time to kind of digest the reveal and have it change the dynamics or paradigm of a show's narrative. And then when you rewatch the show, it's like ideally when a mystery is revealed it should add layers and texture to like how you're seeing the overall narrative. But a lot of times for shows that are of lesser quality, when they do like dangling plot, especially genre fiction, it's just like it's just really much driven. It's like, all right, how do we keep people watching week to week without really thinking through what is the value of like Godolphin being actually the corpse? Does that really make like change the whole game? Right? Like Doug, like he's like when Hamish Lucas plays Doug, he's sympathetic, whatever, but he's just kind of like it could have been any person, that Hamish Lucas could have been playing. And I just don't think there's any value in like Godolphin being the one behind it all happening so late in the game. If it happened maybe in the middle, and maybe you have more time for Ethan Slater, who's Thomas Godolphin, to maybe flesh out, and maybe the way he plays like himself would have been maybe not the same as Hamish Linklater, but have been different and noteworthy and interesting enough of its own. And I just feel like with the time we have, it's like, okay, he's just really like he's just kind of doing a lesser version of Hamish Linklater. And that's kind of a letdown. Like the mystery is just kind of like, oh, like I'm now following a less interesting character. I don't know. I think that just kind of hurts the oomph. Like if like when you watch when you watch the second season, like you're just kind of waiting for like now you know that's like, oh I'm just, the ride you're enjoying with Hamish Linklater, it's gonna end and it's gonna end in an unsatisfactory way.
I don't know. I enjoyed the reveal. I enjoyed like the idea that he was that psychically powerful, even from just like the burned corpse like
But
state. He was just
what
doing all this from there. I don't.
do you think Ethan Slater's performance was as good as Hamish Linklater's performance, or different enough in an interesting way? Because I feel like what he showed, it's like, oh, I'm not. I don't really like think Thomas Godolphin is that menacing or interesting of a villain.
Well,
He's
yeah, I
not.
remember he didn't have to shoulder as much performance. Where I think Hamish Linklater did enough work
Yeah,
that
but
the guy was able to kind of slot in there for one episode and
yeah,
still feel like the same
no, no.
character. I think he did.
But the thing is that even for a villain that it doesn't have much screen time, you have to have like you have to leave a mark and impression. And so the fact that we went from a guy who's actually interested, like what, regardless of how much screen time you have for Hamish Linklater's Cipher, he's always interesting with whatever you show of him on screen, minute to minute. And I feel like with what we see, what we had with Thomas Godolphin played by Ethan Slater, it's like it's just not as interesting. Whether it be the writing, the performance, it's just not like keeping me engaged. It's like, oh, like I kind of want to go back to Hamish Linklater, being the bad guy. And when he gets killed, it's just like, okay, like it just felt like such a. Honestly, it would have been interesting if like Hamish Linklater was just Thomas Godolphin, and then there was some means of where like the whole like him being killed in like Thomas Godolphin potentially being dead. It's like like the twist wasn't like a cool twist that didn't come out of nowhere. Like people climbed it in, so we're just kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. And like when the shoe drops, like okay, like now we're just kind of waiting just for the show to end because you're not gonna really have much time to sink in and have like something interesting or something that you find engaging, right? And so now it's just like all right, now we're just kind of waiting for the like pieces kind of move, and then character does X and Y. It's kind of a slugfest. It's not like because think about like the end of the first season like it's not just heroes fighting, but like it's the kind of climate of like Ashley being the school, and there's like a media like circus of it. And the second season, it's like much more self-contained, and so there's not as much like interesting stage or things that are like taking advantage of the college setting beyond just this is like we're doing in the Timu danger room setting.
It's a good point. No, I hear you on that because I will say, there was a lot more. I think earlier you mentioned like it was kind of like a school shooter parallel. I mean, the climax of season one definitely had that energy to it. Definitely like the chaos going on the campus. We had Ashley there, so we had our boys connect, but also it was
we had
like
Kate losing her arm. We had like Homelander making an appearance. It's like, and like when they're in jail, it's like I just feel like with what happens at the end of the second season, it's like okay, now the kids are part of the resistance, and it's like okay, this just feels very like.
Which it felt kind of like where we were at the end of season one, only not in a confined location. It was pretty much like okay, they're going to be the outlaws. They're like they're
I just feel like you could have taken a lot of big swings at the end of the second season, and the fact that they didn't. Beyond just like, all right, there's like an empty spot for a dean. It's like, well, any of the superheroes in the seven can just easily slot in to be the dean. Like freaking Sister Sage could be the honestly, like if you didn't have like how interesting would have been if Sister Sage came in instead of being CEO of Vought, she would have been the dean of Vought. And she's like super smart and she's the main antagonist. And that would be so interesting for like Marie Moreau, like this plucky, young black girl going against like this super like basically Lex Luthor runs the school. And that I think that would have been so interesting. But like Sister Stage is just like, oh, she's just like hooking up with Thomas Godolkin through Doug, and then she's like giving like, oh, don't go, get ahead of yourself. And when he's talking about like being above Paul,
I do like the idea she really liked Godolkin because of like I don't know, I like that
because
concept.
like there's a bit of an intellectual peer to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
but
Like,
she's and so like we see she has to get lobotomized to settle for the deep. It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
this is
And so like for me, it's like, man, if you wanted someone who was like super smart and like analytical, it's like, why not just use Sister Stage and getting instead of getting this new character and having to kind of manufacture like the whole Thomas Godolkin all? Because he could cut that all out and have Sister Stage, who is like, because of her intelligence, puts Homelander to basically take over the United States. Like, imagine what she could do just on her own in a
Mhm.
college campus where like people are like wanting to like ingratiate themselves to whoever's the new dean or the admin to like be in a good position on a secret team or whatever.
Hmm. And so also I want to talk about Stan Edgar. So again, I've mentioned this before. I'm obsessed with Stan Edgar and the boys. I just I love him. Not just look, I love Giancarlo Esposito. That's part of why I love him. But beyond that, just I just still I am still head over heels. I even told the man this. I see Rohit's a very busy lawyer. He doesn't have time to watch the podcast. We did a Comic Con trip before. I met Giancarlo recently,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Stan Edgar, I'm still head over heels for like his introductory scene in. I guess the scene that in his season 2 reintroductory scene, I guess you might call it, the scene between him and Homelander, where basically the idea that Homelander, we built him up throughout season 1 to be this terrifying force, and yet the head of Vought is like the very human head of Vought is like the one person he is genuinely intimidated by, and I loved it. He gives like the history of Frederick Vought and everything, and then all you are simply bad product. Oh my god, I love that. That's also I think from like the last scene they shared together. I'm saying like that scene and going to that end scene with them, the whole like he was kind of like the father figure for Homelander before we introduced the soldier boy of it all. I I just love all that with Stan Edgar, and just the fact that he was him spelling out like like the real he represented like the corporate nature of the boys and how to run that and all that. So I just love that his reappearance here with the granddaughter with Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically avenging. They're kind of in part they're avenging Victoria Newland, but knowing Stan Edgar, really it's like his legacy ultimately is the company more than his daughter. But that still, though, I think there's attachments. There's still like some familiar stuff. It's kind of unclear how much he really does, care for his family. But I'd like to think he does, but I
I
don't know.
I kind of wish it would have been interesting with because considering how Stan Edgar is a very conniving, manipulative
Yeah.
individual. I think it would have been interesting for John Carl Esposito through the direction acting, whatever, to maybe have like a different way of playing Stan Edgar, where he's actually a lot more like weirdly like congenial and nice, like how John Carl Esposito
Well,
is.
we
Like,
see him being really nice with the granddaughter, though. We've seen
no,
that.
but it'd been interesting for him to done that with our Gen V cast because here's the thing: if you watch The Boys, you expect Stan Edgar to operate one way. And then if you're just watching only Gen V, you don't watch a lot of The Boys, you don't know how this like you hear like, oh, this guy's coming manipulative, but if he's coming off as like this nice G, like how John Carlos Esposito is in interviews and interacting with fans, that's something that like kind of throws you off. And I think that was something cool for like, all right, do we trust this guy?
I think he was a lot more congenial in his episode appearance here, though, than he
I mean, I
was.
mean, I mean, I just feel
I'm
like he
saying
was
comparatively, I think he was. Again, think
comparatively.
about it. He's not running a company right now. I think he.
No, but I feel like he still carried himself that like he's basically better than everyone and except
Yes.
his granddaughter. And I feel like it would have been nice for him to like maybe like because the thing is, it's weird to me how the parents for these characters are such a big part of like their psychology, their arcs in the first season. And in the second season, the parents are just not in the picture, which is crazy because I feel like the parents should be involved with the picture in light of like what these kids have gone through, right?
Right.
And yeah, that's just something where it's like it just feels like a lot of things were kind of put to the side and they were just like blinders put upon and just narrow focus on focusing on this one plot and doing X, Y, and Z, and nothing else that further that was just kind of put, just de-emphasized. And I don't know. I think the show, for all the issues I had with the first season, I could at least appreciate that there was some attempts to like say something about being a young college student, in a world where superheroes were close to celebrities, like all that stuff, all that drama, there was and might have been dropped the foreground like mid to late of season one. It was still there, and season two just isn't really there. It's like you don't really like. I don't feel like these kids are just students. I feel like they just happen to be at school, and they're not like struggling to like. Because I think like, have you read Animorphs or the Animorphs like series?
Uh, wait. The animal. It's like the three animal characters, right?
No. It's Animorphs is like where like these group of teenagers like can turn to any animal and they're fighting against like an alien race that's like wanting to invade Earth or whatever.
No idea.
Okay. So it's like this book series, and a lot of the books is about like how these kids are balancing like trying to be like regular teenagers and like be like superheroes or fighting against like this big alien force. And these kids like can you think of like how often like we see our characters go to class and then having to deal with like whatever the teacher's telling them or trying to like keep up appearances, whatever. It just didn't feel like, and I just feel like it's a thing for genre shows featuring young characters. Like after a while, like like show forgets or just intentionally doesn't focus on them being actual like students at a high school or college, which makes you think like why just have these young characters and just having them be like established adults with like part time, just like stuff like that. I feel like it just takes away from the reality of the show that like things really interesting, and then now you just have them like they might as well just like I feel like nobody even makes like a joke about like oh like you know you'd be lucky to even graduate because of how much classes you missed or whatever, and then they just never not even acknowledged or whatever or anything like that.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to kind of throw in there too was the black hole Trojan horse idea. That one felt kind of wonderfully Kripke esque. I gotta be honest.
Remind me what about.
So black hole is the character on campus who uh, let's say has an interest in people climbing in, I guess, out of his butt.
No, he makes clones of himself, right?
No, I don't think he make. No, he doesn't make clones. It's like, well, that's was that a clone?
No, that is a clone. No, that's the whole thing is
I
that
don't
he
remember.
makes.
They all that. Well, yeah, but they all were able to still go in there though. So maybe so he can make
No,
clones too.
that's the whole joke is that like he just makes dumb clones of himself, and
Oh, so they. I didn't realize that was. I thought it was an actor looked kind of like him. So that's actually.
no. He's a guy that like literally poops out like dumb copies of himself.
I didn't
Yeah,
catch because I remember like correct me if I'm wrong like the at the end though he snuck everyone in like at the end didn't he?
no, I don't remember him stick. I thought he
Wait, you
was.
don't really know what I'm saying? It's
No,
like no. At the okay, remember everyone in the last episode during the big battle, they snuck our main cast, inside, and that's how they got in there. They kind of snuck into the big, and Godolkin's doing his thing where he's systematically using everyone.
But wasn't the guy who pooped out people like killed like immediately killed off by like resuscitated Godolkin?
Okay, well, no, wait. That guy, I'm pretty sure that guy. Okay, so I know earlier you were talking about that guy when you said he poops out. I think that I thought it was that guy had a different lane power. I don't think he just pooped out
No, that's
clones.
literally his power.
You sure? I don't know because that guy was like, wasn't he like the guy dressed like the baby?
Yeah, that's the guy. No, because the guy dressed like the baby. That's like his dumb. That's like a. That's like his dumb clone. That's why he's in the baby outfit. That's like because
Okay,
yeah, he's like part of his hazing is that he just poops out like dumb clones of himself, and the dumb
Okay, well,
clone.
even if he can make clones, the other thing he can do, we have somebody who basically, he carries, we have like Emma and Jordan and, I don't know, Polarity's in there too, but hell, a bunch of people crammed in there, and that's how they Trojan horse their way in. So I guess, either got two powers or, I don't know, because his name is Black Hole. And that explains what his power set is, where it's like an infinite space inside there. See, it's the deafening silence that worries me.
No. Okay. Wait. Let me just see for a second.
I didn't
Okay.
pick up on the
No.
fact that it was a
So
clone. That's possible.
okay. Yeah. There's two different. Yeah. Wait.
So are we talking about the same guy, or are there two?
No, there's okay. Yeah. No, there's two different characters.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So okay. Black Hole is the guy that like is in the frat with Sam, and he's actually like he's actually not like a piece of shit or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, not like he's the one they do Trojan horse with that guy at the end, right? That's how they all get in there to kind of like do the big fight.
No, so they both have. So they both have butt power. He literally sucks things in through his
Yeah,
anus.
because he had the guy who climbed out earlier, and we set that up.
Poops out dumb guys, from his anus, and he's the one that gets killed by Godolphin when he's resuscitated.
Okay.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about, right? The one that's like,
I remember there. I can't remember what that guy's power was. But I know who you're talking about, though. I just don't. I didn't remember what his deal was. I remember he was like Sam was stuck with him like on the chain and everything. But
it's a Hempel. Hempel's his name.
yeah, Hempel. Yeah, that's the name. And I don't know what his power set was. So Hempel, that's what he did.
Yeah, he literally puts out like dumb clones of himself.
I'm not saying when Godolphin would ask him what his power is. I mean, that's what he. I don't know. It doesn't sound like a death worthy power. You sure that's what it says his power was?
Okay, let me just look.
Because that's the thing. It just feels like I can make clones of myself. It's like I don't. I was going to take a moment while we're fact checking our poop guy here. We have Sonia Pantoja in the comments saying hi. Hello.
Man. I feel like I'm not. Okay, who do you recall being the first soup that like Godolphin kills when he's resuscitated? Like,
well, that's the thing. I thought he had like a weird goo power. That's what I think you're getting the poop from. But
no, because then the goo is like it's kind of like when when a baby's born, and it's kind of like the goo or like like the fluid from
afterbirth.
Yeah, that's kind of like how that's kind of what he does when he's like pooping out his like clones.
I mean, I guess. Okay, is that what it says?
Yeah, okay. Let me look at members because I know specifically there's a.
All I know is my guy was named Black Hole, and he was how they all snuck in there.
No.
And we set him up because he had like a guy who just like popped his head out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jacob says placenta. I mean, was it placenta thing? I know there was like a gag about placenta in there somewhere. I don't know if it was this guy or not. I mean, maybe. Yeah, I think Jacob's. I think you're. I don't know. I think it was something that had to do with the placenta. There was some guy with a weird placenta power. Maybe that's what we're thinking of. Well, that's who you're thinking of again, as terms of who the baby man was who got killed.
Yeah, because I remember distinctly like he's basically like a pledge.
Yeah.
And then like his thing is that he has to just poop out his like dumb clones and like carry them out like a baby.
I guess. All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's like because I remember like that like Tom like Godolphin just hated like a guy having that dumb of a power.
Yeah, but I mean, still, he's had this spell. I'm saying in terms of like him describing what the power was and him making the decision. Oh yes, I'm going to kill you. I just feels like you need more of a simple cell for that, and I could have sworn it was a lot to say like a simpler line than I birth clones of myself. Like that doesn't really. It just doesn't sound right to me. Again, so it doesn't really matter, but the point being, we had a pledge with a lame power that he killed.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the black hole guy, because that guy lived. And he
The
was
black
one of the,
hole. I'm no. I think we're so. Those two separate characters.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a guy who literally is killed off because his power is lame.
yes. Yeah, so there's a guy with a lame power who gets killed off earlier, who's dressed like the baby, and then we have a different guy who is then they use who's at the frat like with the Rufus and everything, and they sneak in
Mm-hmm.
through through where the sun don't shine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyway, I don't know, Point Bannislaw is like a neat, sick and wrong kind of cryptic way of like of, like getting him in there. It's just and poor Doug got killed by Black Noir too. That was kind of sad, but I do love like Polarity's like asking, wait, so you talk now? Because he's been out of the loop and been like, oh yeah, we have a new Black Noir.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, anyway, so Murray, she kills Godolkin. Which basically was kind of Stan Eggers, kind of ace in the hole. So he's gonna definitely looks like he's gonna be taking interest in Murray Moreau with smart money would suggest. Polarity volunteers take the fall, and then we have basically our boys season 5 connection here, where they're fugitives on the outside now, alongside Starlight and A Train.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I mean,
Oh, never mind. Okay, so this is all right. So actually, I'm gonna have to. So the black hole, that guy,
yeah,
he has black holes coming out of his anus.
yes,
The guy who comes out, who I thought was just like no. So okay, I'm that was a mix up on my part. So the
one
guy who
could
gets
say his butt buddy, but in a
no, so,
literal
the guy who
sense.
gets killed, no, the guy who gets killed by Godolkin, his power is literally turning his toes into opposable thumbs.
See, I told you it was something stupid.
Yeah. I didn't realize I probably just had a brain fart of facial blindness because yeah that's okay. That probably, as you can tell, it's just kind of yeah. So black hole guy, he has black holes that suck in or expel out things from his anus.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy that's the baby, he's just a guy who has like really lame powers.
Yeah,
Thumbs. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So never mind. Okay. All right.
I'm glad we dedicated this much focus to that.
No, sorry. Well, I mean, no. But he okay. But just going back to sort of the whole thing of like the Godolkin thing, it's like I feel like it would have been interesting for. That's the thing. It's like you only have like one episode where like you have the real Godolkin. I feel like this would have been interesting to have done like mid season and have like the second half of the season deal with the ramifications of a just alive Thomas Godolkin. But that's the thing, like the things that or big reveals, they just don't have enough time to like marinate and have characters like deal with the consequences of the reveals. They're just like, oh, here's the crazy thing, deal with an episode, and that's it. A episode or two. So
Mm.
yeah.
All right, so I think overall, we weren't like over the moon with season 2. I mean, I thought it was good, but not as good as season 1, and obviously, we're not quite topping the boys.
I think I just think it's very noteworthy that like characters like Jordan, Emma, and like Sam to a certain extent, they're just kind of like there, and it feels like Marie, Kate, and then the adults have more things going on, and I don't know. It just I really kind of feel like Jordan. That's like it doesn't feel like the writers like hadn't know what to do with the character, after the first season, and like the relationship stuff. It's like the fact that Marie was a virgin and lost her virginity to like Jordan, and that was like a cause of tension. It's like okay, like like this was like something that I would see in like a CW teen drama, and it's like I feel like we could do something more interesting, you know, and more dramatic than like like falling in love with the first person you lose your virginity to. But It's I just feel like the actors are doing the best they can with the material they have, but I just feel like the characters aren't given their due in terms of having interesting arcs or continuations from what they were dealing with the first season. And it feels like it's just it feels like perfunctory, like oh, like you wouldn't if you kind of blink, you wouldn't really think about how the characters whose powers like cause them a lot of like social grief and anxiety or whatever. It's like oh, they're just kind of like move past that, and then now there's just nothing new, exciting, or challenging for them to go through beyond just the main like a plot.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it can't all be winners.
Well.
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of. Let's just say, there's some missed opportunities in season two for sure. I mean, look, I still liked it. I thought it was, it was kind of a nice week to week thing to have. And at the end of the day, look, I mean, it's just something that kind of tied you over until the boys comes back for the ending, which I mean, I'm looking forward to.
I
Not.
mean, I,
I just want
like,
to know how. Man, I want to see how it ends. You know.
I know, and like here's the thing: it's like I'm already kind of like gone through, like I'm already like sunk in, and I'm gonna try to finish. Obviously, we're gonna finish out the boys season 5, but it's like I just feel like for me, it's like I feel like the franchise of the boys, if it's wanting to provide entries, like and expand the lore, there needs to be focus on why it is you want to tell a story beyond just hey, we're just wanting to flesh out like things like you could flesh out the minutia of a world in like in like a studio made encyclopedia or wiki or something like what is it you're wanting to tell with certain characters in this universe, and how do you want to go about it in a way that's interesting and fresh. And I feel like that's not the focus. I feel like if the focus is like, hey, we're like the boys is this hot IP, let's just kind of do as much. And like there's a really serious concern. I think we're already kind of at the point of there being significant brand dilution. And yeah, the fifth season comes out, it's like consider how other shows that like have already kind of had the wheels come off, like yeah, would you say overall that the boys is a show that is some of the best in the superhero television game? I don't. I think past the first two seasons, I feel like it's kind of gone down in estimation, and I think the other spinoffs don't really do much to like support it. And I just feel like for studios that are trying to think about how to navigate like audience like interest and maintaining that interest, it's like you got to just think about why is it you're wanting to tell a story rather than hey, people like these stories, like these characters, like this world, let's just expand and do whatever. It's like okay, you got to focus on what makes a story interesting and what do you want to see the story beyond just I want to see more definition of the picture. I feel like if someone can appreciate a spin-off story as its own thing and it has a beginning, middle, and end and has something to stay, you can appreciate a world where there's different creatives saying different unique things in a world that's multifaceted and complex and interesting. And there are franchises that do all that. And there's a good sense of quality control. But I think here it's like because Amazon doesn't have a lot of like homegrown IPs, like they're really for the things that are hits, they're just really trying to ram in and just make as much money and profit as possible. And I just don't want the boys to be just like Amazon's Walking Dead, where I just because think of it this way, like Dragon, like do you watch any of the spin-offs for The Walking Dead or keep up with The Walking Dead now?
I'm not the person asking about The Walking Dead on any front, but no.
But do you know people that keep up with like The Walking Dead or any of its like continuation spin-offs or whatever?
Not particularly the spinoffs, no.
No, but think of it this way: think of how big of a cultural zeitgeist The Walking Dead was, and now it's such a shell of itself. I'm just really don't want the show that like I fell in love, like I got so much into the first two seasons, such a breath of fresh air, like be in that like had the same faith. Like I think about how the CW started in such an interesting, fresh way, and it has ups and downs. And when outside of a few certain series having more better quality seasons than others, like it what like the CW, I think the like Arrowverse is a mixed bag, and I just feel like for big superhero like properties in television, like there has to be an emphasis, stronger emphasis of quality control than you do in movies, because you can just kind of get into a rhythm, and if the rate and basically the ratings don't fall down past a certain point, and you just kind of keep going it, and it's like you have something more to do beyond just, hey, there's a level of fan interest that kept us going, and we're just kind of spinning our wheels and doing whatever, and not having a sense of like, where do we want to go, why do we want to go there, and where do we want to end things in a way that like we can be proud of the legacy of the show.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
All right. Okay, that about does it, folks. So, thanks for tuning in, or I guess tuning in the aftermath, and hopefully you find some substance in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, that'll do, and we'll definitely be talking about the boys season 5 when that happens, and who knows what's going to happen in the meantime. All right, school's out.
All right.